The candlelight trembled. Nora Reynolds set the espresso cup down with steady hands even though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a bird trapped in a cage, because showing fear in a place like this was a mistake, was dangerous, was something she had learned 8 years ago and never forgotten. The cup clinked against the saucer. Soft. Deliberate. Professional. Behind her, the other servers moved like ghosts through the dark wood and white tablecloths of Alessandro's, their footsteps muffled on the carpet, their voices lower than whispers. The man at the corner table didn't look up from his phone. Alessandro Caruso. Tall, broad-shouldered, somewhere in his middle 40s but carrying himself like someone who had stopped aging at 30. His suit was charcoal grey, tailored, the fabric alone worth more than everything Nora owned combined. His shirt was open at the collar, and a thin gold chain caught the candlelight. A scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, old and silver, a map of something violent from his past. He had the kind of eyes that didn't move often, but when they did, entire conversations ended. She turned to leave. That was the rule. Serve and disappear. Serve and vanish. Be invisible. One more moment, Miss Reynolds. His voice stopped her. Deep. Solid like an oath. How did he know her name? She had been working at Alessandro's for 4 months and had served this table exactly 17 times. She knew because she counted everything. Counted the tips that barely covered half of Emma's lunch account. Counted the days until her eviction. Counted the breaths between when customers arrived and when she could finally breathe again. She turned back. Yes, sir. The espresso is perfect. It reminds me of Rome. 1987, a cafe on the Via Veneto where I watched the sun come up over the Tiber. He smiled. It transformed his entire face. Made him look almost human. Almost gentle. My Lieutenant Bruno tells me you walk home alone after closing shift. Through neighborhoods that become less safe as the night deepens. The temperature in the room shifted. Something cold moved through the air. Behind Alessandro, a man she had seen before, Bruno, built like a cement block, with scars across his knuckles, sat very still. His jaw was tight. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. I am fine, sir. I have been walking those streets for... The restaurant door exploded inward. The sound came first. Not a bang but a crack, sharp as a whip, a splitting open of wood and glass and the violent shift of air. A man stood in the doorway, arm extended, gun raised. The gun was steady. The man wearing it had a scar across his left eye and rage carved into every line of his face. Douglas Hale. She didn't know his name. She would learn it later. Right now there was only the gun and the moment stretching into something eternal. Everything slowed. Time became something tangible, something she could feel on her skin like cold water. The barrel swung. Not toward her. Toward the table. Toward Alessandro Caruso. She did not think. Thought was a luxury for people with options, for people with time, for people who had anything left to lose. Her body moved before her mind caught up. Her legs carried her forward. Her hands pushed. She threw herself between the Mafia boss and the gun like a shield made of flesh and bone and the desperate mathematics of a woman who had learned that some things were worth dying for. The gunshot split the air like a blade through silk. It was louder than silence. It was everything and nothing. It was the end of the world and the beginning of it all at once. She hit the floor. The impact stole her breath. Her white uniform shirt bloomed red. Crimson spreading across the cotton like a flower opening. And then the pain arrived. Delayed. Shattering. A burning so intense it consumed every other sensation, every thought, every prayer she had never learned to say. Her eyes found Alessandro's. His face had transformed. The controlled composure shattered. His hands, those powerful, careful hands, caught her as she fell. He lowered her gently to the ground. Around them, the world was chaos. Bruno tackled the shooter. Luca was shouting into a phone. The other diners were screaming. But Nora heard none of it clearly. Sound had become a distant thing, muffled, like she was underwater. "Stay with me." His voice was urgent, stripped of everything except raw need. "Stay with me. What is your name?" "Nora. Nora Reynolds." "Nora. Stay with me. I need you to stay with me." Her vision blurred. The white tablecloths and candlelight and his desperate face all melted into watercolor. She tried to speak. Her lips moved. Words came out broken, fractured. "Emma and Marcus. School at dawn. There is an eviction notice. Red deadline. 12 days remaining. I need to be there for the children. I need to earn enough to stay." Her hand was shaking. "I have $5 in my pocket. Just $5. That is all I have left. The coins." She could see them scattering across the polished floor. Nickels and dimes and pennies. 12 days of wage starvation in loose change scattered like prayer beads across marble that had been washed that morning by someone else's exhausted hands. "I have you." His hands pressed against her side. Warm. Steady. Trying to hold her together. "I have you now. You are not going anywhere. Not alone. Not now." But she was already fading. The darkness came like the tide, inevitable and complete. The ambulance arrived in 4 minutes. The siren screamed through the San Francisco night like a warning no one had heeded. Douglas Hale was already gone, running, disappearing into the neighborhoods where people learned not to ask questions and money changed everything. The police arrived and took statements from the shell-shocked diners. Bruno stood in the corner and made a phone call in Italian, his voice low and urgent. "He is not himself," Bruno said into the phone. His eyes were on Alindro, who was still kneeling where Nora had fallen, her blood on his hands, his shirt, his expensive suit. "I have never seen him like this. In 15 years, he has never been like this." On the other end of the line, 3 blocks away, a woman named Victoria Ashford hung up her phone and smiled. She had been watching Douglas Hale for weeks, had been funneling information, had been setting pieces on the board. She didn't know yet about Nora Reynolds. She didn't know that a waitress with $5 and an eviction notice was about to become the catalyst for everything that would follow. But she would know. Soon. Victoria Ashford made it her business to know every detail about every player on her board. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us understand how a woman with nothing came to that moment. Let us see the invisible threads that had pulled Nora Reynolds toward that restaurant, toward that table, toward a choice she made without choosing. The morning Nora walked Emma and Marcus to school was like every other morning. Dark. Cold. November wind cutting through the streets of San Francisco like a blade wrapped in ice. Emma was 5 years old, still sleepy, still trusting. Marcus was 7, already learning to carry worry in his young shoulders. Their backpacks were worn. The zippers stuck. Nora had patched Marcus's jacket 3 times already, but the seams kept splitting. She counted her money as they walked. $7 in her pocket yesterday. $2 spent on bread. $1.50 on milk. She had eaten the crusts the children didn't finish. $3.50 remained. That was it. That was everything that stood between her and the eviction notice on the kitchen table, the one with the red deadline bleeding into the white paper like a wound that would not close. 12 days. The number haunted her. 12 days to find $12,000. 12 days to make a miracle happen or make herself and her children disappear. But children didn't vanish silently. They cried. They needed things. They trusted their mothers to keep them safe. She had failed. Already. Long before the eviction notice arrived, she had already failed. She was just still pretending she hadn't. The kitchen was dark when Nora Reynolds woke, the kind of dark that had no time attached to it, could have been midnight or 4 in the morning. She did not turn on the light. Light costs money. She sat on the edge of the mattress in the corner of the one-bedroom apartment, feet on cold linoleum, and listened to Emma breathing on the couch across the room, that soft, trusting sound children made when they had no idea how fragile their world was. Marcus slept on a cot in the hallway, too old to share the living room with his sister but too young to understand why their mother's face tightened every time the neighbor's television blared through the thin walls. Nora's back ached. It always ached. Some pains lived in bones so deep that time could not reach them. She dressed in the dark, pulling on yesterday's waitress uniform, the black pants with a stain on the left knee that no amount of scrubbing could erase. The fabric was soft from 1,000 washings, worn thin enough that she could see her skin through it in certain light. She did not look at herself in the mirror. She had stopped doing that 3 years ago, somewhere around the time she realized that the woman looking back was just an echo of something that had lived before. At 4:45, she woke Emma. The child's eyes opened with that terrible acceptance, no questions, no complaints, just a little girl learning already that mornings meant movement, meant shoes, meant holding her mother's hand in the dark. Nora found Emma's jacket hanging on the back of a chair, the zipper broken, safety pinned at the collar. She found Marcus already sitting at the kitchen table, fully dressed, his backpack at his feet like a soldier awaiting orders. "Good morning, baby," Nora whispered, touching his hair. "Morning, Mama," he said, his voice careful, already knowing something was wrong before he knew what it was. They walked to school through fog so thick it turned the buildings into ghosts. November in San Francisco meant wind that cut through layers, through skin, through the careful numbness Nora had constructed to survive. Emma's small hand in her left, Marcus's slightly larger hand in her right, Nora moved through the empty streets like a woman walking through a museum of her own life. These blocks had been different once. These corners had held possibility. Now they held only the accumulation of small failures, each one settling into her shoulders like snow. "Mama, are we poor?" Emma asked, the question arriving without warning the way children's questions did, unfiltered, devastating. Nora's jaw tightened. "We are careful with money, sweetheart." "But are we poor?" "We have each other," Nora said, and it was not an answer because she had no answer that would not destroy her daughter's morning. They reached PS 41 at 6:15. The school did not open until 7, but Nora arrived early anyway. There was a garden program, free breakfast, a warm room where Emma could sit until the bell rang. The teacher, Mrs. Chen, smiled when she saw them. It was a kind smile, the kind that meant she understood more than a child's mother wanted to be understood. "Nora, good morning," Mrs. Chen said. "Come in, both of you. We have oatmeal." Nora did not move. She could not eat from the children's breakfast fund. She could not take from what little the school could offer. "Emma, go on now. Have something warm." Emma hesitated, reading her mother's face the way children learn to read, looking for danger signs. Then she let go of Nora's hand and walked inside, her small backpack dragging on the floor. Marcus hugged his mother without being asked. He was 7 years old and he hugged her like she was leaving forever. Maybe he knew something she didn't. Maybe children could sense when the ground beneath them was about to give way. The walk to Murphy's diner took 45 minutes on foot. Nora's shoes had a hole in the left sole. She could feel the cold pavement coming through. Her feet were already numb by the time she reached the restaurant, which meant they wouldn't hurt again until tonight, when the warmth of the kitchen thawed them back to sensation. Small mercies. She had learned to count them like currency. Murphy's Diner had been there since 1987, the same red vinyl booths, the same checkered floor with tiles chipped at every corner, the same hum of fluorescent lights that flickered in patterns that suggested they were about to die but never quite did. The smell was coffee and grease and the ghost of 1,000 eggs cracked into a pan. Mr. Simmons was behind the counter, counting the register from the night shift. He was 63 years old with hair transplant scars visible on his scalp when he leaned forward, and he owned the restaurant like it owed him something. Which it did. Everything owed him something. "You're early," he said, not looking up. "Wanted to check the schedule," Nora replied, tying her apron around her waist. Mr. Simmons finally looked at her. His eyes were pale blue, the color of water you would not want to drink. Double shift available. Caroline called in sick again. You want it? Nora's body did not want it. Her body wanted to collapse into a booth and sleep until the cold stopped moving through her bones. But her body was not consulted in decisions anymore. Yes, she said. Thank you. 16-hour day. That's 7 to 11 at night, with 2 hours break between shifts. You'll make maybe $87 if the tips are decent. He paused. You'll owe me house fees on those tips, same as always. Same as always meant 20% automatically deducted. Nora had done the math 1,000 times, trying to find a number that worked, trying to construct a future from the pieces she had. There was no number that worked. $87 became $69. Minus $69 of what she already owed for October. The month she fell behind. The month she chose to feed her children instead of paying her share of the apartment's utilities. She tied her hair back with a rubber band that had been in her pocket for 6 months. The restaurant filled gradually with the breakfast crowd. Construction workers. Tired office people. A man in an expensive suit who ordered coffee and checked his phone. Nora poured and refilled, smiled at jokes that did not deserve smiling at, remembered that table had requested extra napkins, remembered that table had been rude 3 days ago so she should brace herself for rudeness today, because people like that did not change. She was good at this work. That was the cruelty of it. She was efficient and invisible and excellent at her invisibility. At noon, during the gap between shifts, Nora sat in the alley behind the restaurant and counted the money in her pocket. $3.42 from tips. She had started the morning with $1.58. She had not eaten lunch. She would not eat lunch. The sandwich Mr. Simmons offered his employees cost $6. She could not afford $6. She pulled the envelope from her apron pocket. It was a thin envelope. The eviction notice inside was thinner still, just a single page, but it contained everything. The address, the date it was issued, the date by which she must vacate or be forcibly removed. 12 days. Written in red ink like a warning, like a curse, like the lid of a coffin being sealed. The number was $12,000. 12,000. The word seemed to exist in a different language, one she would never speak fluently. $12,000 was a house. It was a year's salary at 3 times her current wage. It was an impossible number written in red ink on a piece of paper that controlled every decision she would make from this moment forward. Nora put the envelope back in her pocket. She counted the coins again. $3.42. Plus $1.58. $5 total. $5 stood between her and the street. She did not cry. Her tears had dried up somewhere on a Greyhound bus, 3 years ago, when she had left Jacksonville with 2 babies and a suitcase and a prayer that San Francisco would be different. That violence could not follow her across the country. That a city this large could swallow the old Nora and produce someone new. The city had swallowed nothing. The old Nora had simply learned to hold her breath. The evening shift came. More coffee. More plates. More men in construction boots who left $1 on a $35 bill and called it generosity. A woman who complained that her eggs were not sunny side up, even though that was exactly what they were, and demanded new eggs without paying. Mr. Simmons had told Nora to remake them. Nora had remade them. The woman left no tip. By 10 o'clock, her feet had moved beyond pain into something like muscle memory. Her legs operated independently of her mind. Her hands poured and cleared and wiped and returned. She watched the clock tick toward 11. 1 more hour. 1 more hour and she could collect her pay and walk home in the dark and sleep for 6 hours before waking to walk the children to school again. At 10:35, the door opened and cold wind pushed through the restaurant. 3 men in dark coats entered. They were not the construction workers. They were not the office people. They were the kind of men who made other people notice them by being present, by moving in coordination, by carrying something invisible that had weight. One of them scanned the restaurant. His eyes passed over the booths, the counter, the kitchen window. They stopped on Nora. She was pouring coffee for a regular customer, someone's cup held in her hands, the liquid dark and steaming. She did not look directly at the man. She had learned in Jacksonville not to make eye contact with men who looked like they were used to being seen. But she felt the weight of his attention like heat from an opened oven. The three men sat in the back booth, away from the windows, in the place where patrons went when they wanted to be private. Nora did not approach them. Other waitresses did that. Nora carried her invisibility like armor, stayed behind the counter, kept her head down. But the coffee pot grew heavy in her hands. She could feel something shifting. Like the moment before a storm arrives, when the air changes and the animals know to run. The blizzard arrived on a Tuesday night without warning, the kind of storm that turned the world white and erased all certainty. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets against the windows of the diner, and the wind rattled the glass like something alive and furious, testing the seal, demanding entry. By 9 o'clock, visibility had collapsed to almost nothing. The parking lot had vanished beneath white. The streetlights became ghostly smudges in the darkness. Inside the diner, the heating system labored against the cold, and the air smelled like coffee and grease and the particular staleness of a place where people had breathed the same recycled warmth for 12 hours straight. Nora stood at the counter, wiping down the register, watching the few remaining customers linger over cold coffee. The forecast had called for rain. Not this. Never this. She thought of Emma and Marcus, safe at Mrs. Chen's apartment next door. Mrs. Chen would keep them until 9 o'clock. It was 8:47. Nora had 13 minutes to close out, collect her pay, and walk home. But the walk was impossible. 12 blocks through neighborhood streets that would become canyons of wind and blind white. A child could lose their way. An adult could lose their way. Her manager approached, counting bills in his palm. "We're closing early. Road's getting bad. Go home." He handed her $83. 83. She took it, added it to the 5 already in her pocket. $88 to her name. Mrs. Chen's car. The thought arrived like a small light in the darkness. Mrs. Chen had mentioned, months ago, that Nora could borrow her Honda if ever there was real emergency. Winter supplies from the food bank sat across town at a distribution center that closed at 8:30 on Tuesday nights. She had planned to walk there tomorrow. But tomorrow the banks would be closed, the road impassable, and Emma had mentioned, quietly, that they were out of milk. Nora did not think. She simply acted. She texted Mrs. Chen from the break room. 3 minutes later, Mrs. Chen replied with a thumbs-up emoji and the Honda's keys would be on Mrs. Chen's kitchen counter. Nora locked the diner, pulled on her coat, and walked into the storm. The Honda was ancient, a 1997 blue sedan held together by rust and optimism. When Nora turned the ignition, the engine coughed twice before turning over, producing a sound like an old man clearing his throat. The heater worked partially, blowing air that was slightly less cold than the outside. The windshield wipers were worn to nubs, and they scraped across the glass without clearing much of anything. But they moved, and that was enough. She drove carefully, both hands on the wheel, leaning forward to see through the haze. The streets were nearly empty. A few cars crawled past, their taillights disappearing into white. Traffic lights swayed in the wind, red and green blurred by falling snow. It took 40 minutes to reach the food bank, a journey that should have taken 15. She loaded her arms with boxes, pasta, rice, canned beans, powdered milk, a dozen eggs in cardboard, all of it donated and free. Her hand shook as she arranged everything on the passenger seat, stacking carefully so nothing would slide. The temperature on the Honda's dashboard read 18 degrees. The drive back took her south on Highway 101, the road that curved around the bay. In clear weather, the bay was visible from the elevated sections, a glimpse of water and sky. Tonight there was nothing but white, the road ahead visible only 30 feet in any direction. Other cars moved like ghosts, their headlights dim in the snow. Nora gripped the wheel. Her breath fogged the windshield. The heater rattled and sputtered. 7 miles from home, the Honda's engine made a sound it had never made before. A sound like something breaking. She felt the steering go heavy in her hands. The car slowed, coasting, and she managed to guide it onto the shoulder before the engine died completely. She tried the ignition. Nothing. Tried again. The engine cranked but would not catch. Again. Again. On the 5th attempt, she knew. It was finished. The car sat tilted slightly into the drainage ditch, surrounded by white, the windshield rapidly disappearing under accumulating snow. She checked her phone. 3% battery. No signal. The time was 8:58. She was still 5 miles from home. Mrs. Chen would give the children until 9 o'clock, and then she would worry. Nora looked at the grocery bags on the passenger seat, at the Honda's dead dashboard, at the snow climbing up the windows like something patient and inevitable. She pulled her coat tighter and waited. The headlights appeared first, 2 pale orbs moving through the white corridor. A shape behind them that gradually became distinct, a large vehicle, black, moving slowly. As it approached, Nora saw it was not alone. 2 more vehicles behind it, all of them black, all of them moving in formation like a school of sharks cutting through water. The lead vehicle slowed. Taillights bloomed red. All 3 vehicles stopped. Car doors opened. Men emerged, 5 of them, all wearing dark coats that hung to their knees, all moving with the synchronized precision of people accustomed to moving together. They spoke to each other in low voices, and one of them, the tall one, the one who carried himself like gravity bent around him, pointed toward the Honda. He walked to her window. Nora's breath caught. She could not see his face clearly through the fogged glass, only a shape. A large shape. Powerful. He tapped on the window with one knuckle. The tap was not aggressive, just a quiet sound, patient. She lowered the window an inch. Wind rushed in, bringing cold that took her breath away. The man leaned down. His face emerged from the darkness. He was perhaps 50 years old, with dark hair silvered at the temples, with a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone like a blade had tried to split his face and failed. His eyes were storm gray, and they held hers without blinking. When he spoke, his voice was deep and solid like an oath, like something that could not be broken. "You cannot stay here. The road is closing. In 1 hour, the highway patrol will shut down this section. You will freeze." Nora said nothing. Her tongue had stopped working. "What is your name?" His voice was not unkind. "Nora. Nora Reynolds." She did not know why she answered. Fear, perhaps. Or something in his tone that suggested the answer mattered. "Where do you need to go, Nora Reynolds?" "Harrison Street. 5 blocks south of here." "But my car." "Bruno." The man straightened and glanced back toward the vehicles. A second man appeared, younger, with the build of someone who broke things for a living. "Load the groceries." The one called Bruno opened the passenger door and began carefully transferring the grocery bags to the black SUV. The eggs went first, handled with surprising gentleness. The man with the scar opened the driver's side door. "Come," he said. It was not a request. Nora hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her not to get into a vehicle with 5 men she did not know. But the wind was howling. Her phone had no signal. Mrs. Chen was waiting for Emma and Marcus. She grabbed her purse and stepped out into the cold. The interior of the SUV was warm, heated, a sudden shock of comfort after the freezing highway. The man drove, his hand steady on the wheel. A third man sat in the passenger seat, looking at his phone. They did not speak as they drove. The windshield wipers moved steadily. The heater hummed. After several minutes, the man spoke. "Tell me about the children." Nora froze. "Bruno said you mentioned children." "How many?" "2. Emma is 8. Marcus is 6. She did not understand why she was telling him this. They are safe. They are with my neighbor. The groceries. They are for them. Yes. He nodded slowly. Milk. Rice. Eggs. A mother's list. He turned the corner onto Harrison Street. The houses were dark, the street empty. He pulled up to her address, the small apartment building with the cracked steps. He put the vehicle in park. "What is your name?" she asked. "Alejandro Caruso." He turned slightly to face her. "I own a restaurant. Alessandro's, on Fillmore. We are hiring kitchen staff. Better pay than wherever you work now. Better hours. Bruno will give you a card with the information." Bruno reached back with a white card. Nora took it, her hand shaking. "Why would you help me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Caruso was quiet for a long moment. His scar caught the streetlight, a thin line of shadow across his face. "Because someone should have helped me once," he said finally, "and no one did. Come to the restaurant when you are ready. Ask for Bruno." Nora stepped out into the snow, the bag of groceries in her arms. She watched the 3 black vehicles disappear into the storm, their taillights fading like embers going cold. Then she climbed the stairs to her apartment, where Mrs. Chen was waiting with Emma and Marcus, and she placed the groceries on her kitchen table in the dark. She looked at the card. Alessandro's restaurant. A phone number. An address in the Marina district. The storm howled outside her window, and Nora stood there holding the card, wondering what had just happened, and knowing with absolute certainty that her life had changed in the moment a powerful man had tapped on her window. 3 weeks later, Alessandro's kitchen was a blur of heat and motion and purpose. Nora moved through it like a dancer who had finally found her rhythm, her hands knowing what to do before her mind could instruct them. She earned $18 an hour. The tips, which the restaurant paid fairly instead of counting as payment for the privilege of working, went directly into her pocket. In 3 weeks, she had earned $2,200. $2,200. The eviction notice with its red-lettered deadline had been paid. She had kept her apartment. She had food in her refrigerator that did not come from the food bank. She had bought Emma new shoes. Real shoes, not shoes from the donation center. The lunch shift was service, which meant controlled chaos. Plates emerged from the line, plated perfectly, and Nora carried them through the dining room with the confidence of someone who had learned to move invisibly between tables. She had worked at the diner long enough to understand that the way to survive was to be unseen, to move like a shadow, to serve without imposing yourself on the space. Then she saw the woman at table 7. The woman was in her 50s, with silver hair cut with surgical precision, wearing a white linen jacket that cost more than Nora's monthly rent. She sat with 3 other women of similar age and similar expense, and as Nora approached to set down water glasses, the woman's voice carried across the restaurant like something designed to be heard by everyone. "They really will hire anyone these days. I saw her working here last week. I heard she has 2 children and no husband. How absolutely tragic." Nora's hands trembled. The water glasses clinked slightly as she set them down. The woman continued, her voice still pitched to carry, still designed to wound. "People like that should not be allowed to work in establishments like this. They bring down the entire atmosphere. Makes the patrons uncomfortable, if you know what I mean." Her friends laughed, a sound like ice breaking. Nora finished placing the water glasses and walked away. Her face burned. She did not look back. She did not cry, though something inside her cracked like old plaster. She went to the kitchen and stood at the pass, her hands gripping the edge, breathing carefully. She recognized the woman. Victoria Ashford, who came in regularly and always ordered the most expensive items and always complained about something. But today her cruelty had felt specific. Today it had felt aimed. That evening, after service ended, Caruso asked her to stay. He led her to a private booth in the back of the restaurant, the kind of booth where business was conducted in whispers, where deals were made and unmade. She sat across from him, and he ordered 2 espressos from a server without asking what she wanted. "Bruno tells me you walk home at midnight," Caruso said, his voice quiet, his gaze steady. "Through Harrison Street." How did he know this? Had Bruno been watching her? Caruso slid an envelope across the table. "First month's advance. Take a cab home. Every night. I do not want you walking those streets at that hour." Nora opened the envelope. Inside were 20s, a stack of them. She counted quickly. $2,000. She pushed it back immediately, her heart beating fast. "I cannot accept this. I have not earned it. I have only worked 3 weeks." Caruso did not touch the envelope. He simply watched her. "Why did you take this job?" he asked. She hesitated. The answer was complicated and painful and not something she had shared with anyone. "Because I had 12 days left before eviction," she said quietly. "Because I owe $125,000 in medical debt from Marcus's surgery when he was born. Because I had $5 to my name. Because my children deserve better than living in a car." She stopped, horrified at what she had just revealed. "I did not mean." "My brother once sold our family to our enemies," Caruso said, "for $300,000. They wanted our operation shut down. He wanted a new life. I had to choose between mercy and survival. I chose survival. It has haunted me for 8 years." His scar seemed darker in the restaurant light. "So when I see someone fighting to survive, I recognize it. I recognize you." Nora's eyes burned. "Why would you help me? I am nobody." Bruno, standing near the kitchen door, shifted uncomfortably. In 15 years of working for Alejandro Caruso, he had never heard him speak about his brother. Not once. Not to anyone. "You are not nobody," Caruso said quietly. "Not to your children. Not to the people who depend on you. No one is nobody when someone else is watching them." He pushed the envelope toward her again. "Take it. No debt. No conditions. No strings." She stared at the money. $2,000. Enough to buy winter coats for the children. Enough to pay the electric bill 3 months ahead. Enough to breathe. "I do not know how to thank you," she whispered. "Do not thank me yet," he said. 2 days later, Douglas Hale walked into Alessandro's for lunch. Nora recognized him instantly. He was a regular, a man in his mid-40s with a kind of expensive suit that had been tailored to suggest power without having to actually possess it. He had cold eyes and an easy smile that did not reach those eyes, and when he requested Nora's section specifically, something small and afraid turned over in her chest. She brought him water and a menu. He ordered the branzino and a glass of expensive white wine, and then he leaned forward slightly, his voice low enough that the surrounding tables could not hear. "I have been watching you, Nora," he said. "Single mother. Medical debt. No support system. I run a service that helps women like you. Private clients. Very good money. Complete discretion. All very professional." Her hands went cold. "What kind of service?" she asked, though she already knew. His smile widened. His teeth were too white. "Companionship. Entertainment. Nothing you have not done before, I am sure." She set the menu down carefully on the table. "I think you have the wrong person. I know about the eviction notice," he continued as if she had not spoken. "I know about the $125,000 you owe. I know about Emma and Marcus. I know about the scars your ex-husband left on your back. I know everything about you, Nora. And I know you are desperate. That desperation is valuable. That is why I am here." She walked away. She did not run. She did not cry. She moved to the kitchen and found the manager and reported what had happened. The manager shrugged. "He tips well," the manager said. "Probably just flirting." Do not make a problem out of nothing. But she knew it was something. She could feel it the way she had felt the storm coming on the highway, a pressure change, a gathering of darkness. That night, as service ended, Caruso noticed her hand shaking as she rolled silverware. He asked what was wrong. She told him about Hale. She told him about the conversation, about the specificity of what Hale knew, about the way he had spoken as if he owned her future. Caruso's expression went stone cold. Something shifted in his face, a door closing, a weapon being drawn. "Stay away from that man," he said, and his voice was not kind anymore. It was the voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "If he approaches you again, you tell me immediately. You do not speak to him. You do not answer his questions. You do not acknowledge his presence. You tell me." She nodded, frightened by the intensity in his eyes. "I understand," she said. As she walked toward the kitchen, Bruno called her back. "One more thing," Bruno said quietly. "That man. Douglas Hale. You should know what he does." Bruno paused, choosing his words carefully. "He takes women who have nowhere else to go. He promises them money, safety, protection. And then he takes their freedom. He has 17 women right now. Maybe 18. None of them can leave." Nora's stomach twisted. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the boss cares if you live or die," Bruno said simply. "And because you should know what you are being protected from." As Nora stood in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of closing, the clatter of pans, the hiss of water, the murmur of voices, she realized something. For the first time in 8 years, she was not alone. For the first time, someone was watching. Someone powerful. Someone who had already decided that whatever came next, she would not face it by herself. Outside the restaurant, beyond the windows, the city lights glittered in the darkness. And in his office upstairs, Alejandro Caruso looked at photographs that Bruno had compiled. Douglas Hale. His network. His operation. And he made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. The door exploded inward at 8:38 in the evening. Alessandro's was closed, the lights dimmed to candlelight, the kitchen staff sent home an hour ago. Nora sat across from Alejandro Caruso in a private booth in the back corner, her hands trembling slightly as she held the wine glass he had poured for her. She had not drunk wine in 8 years. The glass felt fragile, like holding something that could shatter if she breathed too hard. $30 an hour, Caruso said, his voice deep and solid like an oath. Health insurance for you and your children. Dental. Vision. You would manage the day shift. Start immediately. Nora could not speak. Her throat had closed. $30 an hour. That was $60 a day. $300 a week. $1,200 a month. She could keep the apartment. She could keep Emma and Marcus. She could stop counting pennies and wondering which meal to skip. "Why would you do this?" she whispered. Caruso leaned back in his chair, studying her with eyes like storm clouds. "Because you are capable. And because you need help. Those two things should never be at odds." Bruno stood at the bar, 30 feet away, pretending not to watch them. Luca was in the kitchen, making noise with pans to provide the illusion of staff. The restaurant hummed with the sound of the espresso machine cooling down, the gentle murmur of the city outside the windows, the soft clink of glassware. Nora reached across the table. She did not take his hand. She was not that brave. But she placed her palm flat on the white tablecloth between them, and that was enough. "Thank you," she said, and the words split her voice like breaking glass. The front door did not open. It exploded. The wooden frame splintered. Glass from the windows rained across the dining room like 1,000 falling stars. A man in a dark coat stood in the wreckage, his arm extended, a silver pistol catching the light. His face was cold, focused, the face of someone who had practiced this moment 1,000 times in his mind. Everything that happened next moved like a nightmare with no waking point. Caruso's hand moved toward his jacket. Bruno was already moving, his own gun clearing leather. But Nora was faster, and no one understood why. She did not think. She did not weigh her options. She simply stood, and she moved, and she placed herself between Alejandro Caruso and Douglas Hale's hired assassin. The gunshot was a sound like the world splitting open. The bullet tore through Nora's right shoulder, punching through muscle and bone and exiting in a spray of blood that painted the white tablecloth red. She fell backward, and Caruso caught her, his arms around her, his voice screaming her name like a prayer that could not save her. Bruno's return fire came a half-second later. The assassin fell, his body crumpling like a puppet with its strings cut. Dead before he hit the floor. The $5 in change that Nora had been carrying in her pocket, the last money she owned, scattered across the restaurant floor as Caruso lifted her and ran toward the door where Luca had the car waiting, the engine running, the back door open. 18 hours later, Nora woke in a private hospital room with pain screaming through her shoulder. Rain hammered the window in steady, relentless waves. The November storm that had followed her since the beginning of this story had finally caught up with her completely. The machines beside her bed beeped in rhythmic patterns, heart monitor, for pump, oxygen saturation monitor. A nurse in blue scrubs checked the bandages across Nora's shoulder and told her the surgery had taken 4 hours. A bullet wound required careful reconstruction. Nerve damage had to be assessed. Bone fragments had to be removed. The surgery cost $47,000, the nurse said, not unkindly. You will need to speak with billing. $47,000. Nora's vision blurred. The eviction date had passed while she was unconscious. She was officially homeless now. The original debt of $125,000 had grown to $172,000 with this new surgery. She had no insurance. She had no job anymore. Alessandro's had given her permission to take time off, but what then? Her shoulder might never regain full strength. The muscles might atrophy. Nerve damage could mean chronic pain. Chronic pain meant she could not work a double shift. No double shift meant no money. No money meant no apartment. Emma and Marcus were safe with Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who had kept them through the night. But Mrs. Chen could not keep them forever. She had her own grandchildren. Her own limited space. Nora's hands shook as she reached for her phone. She should call child services. She should surrender now, while it was still her choice. Emma was 6. Marcus was 4. They deserved a mother who could provide them with stability, with safety, with a future. They deserved better than this broken thing lying in a hospital bed with a bullet wound and a mountain of debt. She scrolled to the number for the Department of Children and Family Services. Her finger hovered over the dial button. The door opened. Alejandro Caruso walked in, and he was still wearing the shirt with her blood on it. Dark stains across his white linen collar, across his chest. He had not changed. He had come straight from the crime scene, straight from the police statements, straight to her bedside, and he was still wearing her blood. He sat in the chair beside her bed, careful not to disturb the fall line in her arm. "You saved my life," he said simply. Nora's eyes filled with tears. "I have nothing to give them. No home. No money. I failed them." "You threw yourself in front of a bullet for a stranger," Caruso said, his voice steady and strong like a general surveying a battlefield. "That is not failure. That is the bravest thing I have ever seen." She started crying then, truly crying, her whole body shaking with the weight of it all. Caruso reached over and took her hand carefully, as if she might shatter if he held too tight. He made the first phone call from her hospital room at midnight. "Bruno," he said, his voice transformed into something colder, harder, edged like a blade wrapped in ice. "Find Douglas Hale. I want everything. His network. His finances. His associates. Every woman he has trapped. Bring it all to me in 6 hours." He paused. "Yes, I know it is impossible. Do it anyway. The second call came 5 minutes later, to a number Nora did not recognize, a woman's voice that answered on the first ring. Maria, Caruso said. I have a gift for you. A human trafficker with 17 victims. Complete evidence package. Names, locations, financial records. Hard drives with communications logs going back 3 years. He paused. I want immunity for the women. Witness protection if they need it. Another pause. Yes, Caruso calling in a favor. This one is important. He ended the call and looked at Nora. It is finished, he said. He will answer for what he has done. 3 days later, at 5:41 in the morning, federal agents in tactical gear surrounded a waterfront property in San Francisco's industrial district. Douglas Hale's operation ran from a converted warehouse disguised as a logistics company. 17 women, some barely 18 years old, lived in the upper floors in conditions like a prison. No locks on the inside. Locks on the outside. Guards at every exit. Violence promised against anyone who tried to leave. What Hale did not know was that Caruso's men, 12 in black, moving like ghosts through the darkness, Bruno leading them, had been inside for an hour already. They gathered evidence with mechanical precision. Hard drives. Ledgers. Photographs. Medical records. Names and locations and contracts that Hale had forced these women to sign, documents that meant nothing legally but meant everything psychologically. They found money stuffed into walls. They found passports locked in a safe, confiscated to prevent escape. They found love letters Hale had written to himself, fantasies documented in careful handwriting, the sick architecture of his own mind laid bare. When the FBI crashed through the doors at 6:15 a.m., Hale was in his office, feeding documents into a paper shredder. He looked up and saw Bruno standing in the corner of the room, and the color drained from his face completely. Caruso sent you, Hale said. It was not a question. Bruno smiled without warmth. He wants you to know this is for Nora Reynolds. Federal agents swarmed. Handcuffs. Charges read in mechanical voices. The perp walk happened in front of news cameras that had been tipped off by Agent Maria Torres. The footage would go viral within hours, and Hale's face would be on every news outlet in California by lunch. He screamed as they dragged him toward the police car. I have money. I have connections. You cannot do this to me. Do you understand who I am? Special Agent Maria Torres stood beside the vehicle, her face hard as stone. She read the charges in a voice like thunder. 17 counts of human trafficking. Conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Racketeering. Money laundering. You are looking at 40 years federal prison, Mr. Hale. Minimum. No parole. No possibility of early release. 1 hour later, federal agents arrived at Victoria Ashford's country club. She was in the brunch room, sitting at a corner table with 3 other wealthy women, lifting a mimosa to her lips when the agents approached. Her perfect blonde hair was arranged in a style that cost $300. Her diamond bracelet caught the light as she set down her glass. Victoria Ashford, the agent said quietly. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit human trafficking and money laundering. The screaming started immediately. Victoria's face went white, then red, then white again. She stood so fast her chair fell backward. Her designer handbag dropped to the floor. The other women at her table stared in absolute shock, the look on their faces a mixture of horror and fascination, the kind of moment that defined social hierarchies, that destroyed reputations in a single news cycle. This is a mistake. I am a philanthropist. I sit on 3 non-profit boards. You cannot. The handcuffs went on. The cameras caught everything. Victoria Ashford, respectable society woman, her makeup running, her voice shrill, her carefully constructed reputation collapsing like a house of cards. By evening, the story had spread across social media. By the next morning, every news outlet in the country had picked it up. By the end of the week, her name was synonymous with corruption, and every organization she had ever affiliated with was issuing statements of distance and regret. Justice had come, but not the swift kind. Not the merciful kind. Not death, which would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful for what these two had done to 17 women who had no one else to protect them. Instead, justice came as systematic destruction. Federal prison cells. 40 years marked on a calendar. The stripping away of everything they had built, their money, their reputations, their freedom, their future. They would spend the rest of their lives remembering the moment it all collapsed. And neither of them would ever know that it all began with one woman, bleeding on a white tablecloth, throwing herself in front of a bullet for a stranger who had shown her kindness. Sometimes one hand reached out at the right moment can change an entire life. The hospital room fell silent except for the rhythm of machines that kept time like a heartbeat that was not hers. Nora Reynolds sat on the edge of the bed in the pale light of early evening, her left arm bandaged where the bullet had passed through muscle and bone, her chest wrapped where surgery had repaired what violence had torn open. The letter lay on her lap, hospital stationery thin and fragile as skin, and her hand trembled as she pressed pen to paper. Outside, San Francisco's November rain hammered against the window. Inside, only the sound of her breathing and the scratch of ink. She had not slept in 3 days. The doctors said infection was a risk now, that her body needed rest to heal. But rest meant closing her eyes, and closing her eyes meant seeing the moment again, the gun rising, Alindro in the crosshairs, her own body moving without permission from her mind, throwing itself forward like it understood something her brain did not yet know. The pen moved across the page. Words came slowly, each one a stone she was placing into the foundation of goodbye. The hospital stationery felt strange in her hands after weeks of not writing anything but her name on discharge forms. Her penmanship was shaky, the letters of a woman whose body had been broken and was still learning to remember its own shape. She paused. Outside, a car horn. The sound of a city that did not know what had happened in this room, what had changed in the moment a single act of protection had become something neither of them had chosen. Her hand shook. She set the pen down for a moment, breathing through the ache in her chest that was not from the wound. The letter continued. She thought of Douglas Hale, still breathing somewhere in a federal holding cell, awaiting trial. She thought of Victoria Ashford's hands reaching across tables to destroy reputations like they were flowers to be plucked. She thought of all the ways loving someone in Alindro's world was a weapon pointed at your own heart. Her vision swam now. Tears dropped onto the paper, and she watched the ink bloom and spread like the stain of something irreversible. She paused again, and the silence in the room stretched so long she could hear the foredrip, each drop a second falling away from this moment toward the next. She signed her name. Just Nora nothing more. She folded the letter 3 times. Sealed it in an envelope from the bedside drawer. Placed it on the pillow where her head had rested, where the shape of her body was still warm in the fabric. Then she moved. It took 40 minutes to gather what she owned. Her clothes, folded carefully. The small ceramic horse that Emma had made in art class, wrapped in a hospital blanket. The notebook where she had written down every medical bill, every dollar owed, every reason why she was impossible and could not stay. She dressed in the clothes Alindro had brought her, jeans that fit properly, a sweater without holes, shoes that matched. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her hair had been washed by a nurse. Her face had color again. The scars on her neck and collarbone were visible now, no longer hidden beneath the oversized shirt she had worn before. She looked like a woman who had been loved, and that was exactly why she had to leave. The hospital checkout came easily. Nurses asked if she was sure if she should really be leaving with stitches still in place. She nodded and said she needed to get to her children, and something in her voice made them stop asking questions. A cab took her to Mrs. Chen's apartment building in the Mission District. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and gleaming like they had been polished. As the cab pulled up, Nora's breath caught. The building looked different. The peeling paint was gone. New locks shined on the door. A fresh sign hung above the entrance, not the landlord's name anymore, but something else, something new. The whole facade had been restored, repaired, made into something worth living in. Mrs. Chen was waiting on the stoop, her small frame bundled in a coat too large for her body. When she saw Nora, her face broke open into a smile. "He came," she said. 3 days ago. He came with papers and money and he said the building belongs to him now. The old landlord, he is gone. No more evictions, no more threats. Your name is on the lease, Nora. Your name." Nora felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She did not know what to say. She did not know how to process a man with that much power using it to erase the deadline that had been counting down in red ink for so long. "My children," she said instead. "Are they here?" "Upstairs. I made them dinner. They are drawing pictures." Nora climbed the stairs. Each step felt like walking through water. The apartment was warmer than she remembered, and there was laughter, Emma's high, bright laugh mixing with Marcus's lower giggle. Her children. Still here, still hers, still safe. She packed 3 bags with clothes and toys and the things that mattered. She wrote a note to Mrs. Chen, a note, not a goodbye, just an address in Portland and a request that she not tell anyone where they were going. Not yet. The bus station was cavernous and cold. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead like insects. The evening crowd was thinning, travelers with destinations, people running toward something or away from something else. Nora bought 3 tickets with money Alindro had left on her hospital table. She settled Emma and Marcus on a plastic bench, their small bodies tucked against her sides. The letter was in her coat pocket. She would mail it from the first town they reached, she had decided. That way, by the time he read it, there would be miles between them and any chance he might try to find her. Emma tugged her sleeve. "Mama, why are we leaving? I like my new school. The teacher says I am very smart at math." Nora's eyes flooded. She turned away, pressing her lips against her daughter's hair. "Sometimes we have to go to keep the people we love safe, baby." Marcus was already falling asleep against her arm, his small mouth slightly open, his hand gripping the edge of her sweater. He did not understand yet. He would not remember this moment, and someday that would be a mercy. Nora pulled the bus tickets from her pocket. 3 hours until departure. She allowed herself to close her eyes, just for a moment, and imagine Portland, a new city, a new name perhaps, a new life where no one knew she had ever loved a man like Alindro Caruso, where no one knew she had stepped between him and a bullet, where no one could use her to hurt him. But behind her, a voice cut through the station noise like a blade through still water. "What if the people you love do not want you to go?" She turned. Time seemed to stop, the way it always did in the moments that changed everything. Alindro Caruso stood in the entrance of the bus station, rain still clinging to his black coat, his dark eyes finding hers across the crowd of travelers. Behind him stood Bruno and Luca, their faces carefully neutral. And in Alindro's hands, he held an envelope. The envelope. Her letter, unopened but clearly read. Bruno had found it before she could leave it behind. Of course he had. Alindro's men were always watching, always protecting, always one step ahead. She stood slowly, Emma's hand slipping from hers. The little girl looked confused. Alindro crossed the terminal toward them, and every person in that space seemed to understand they were witnessing something significant, something that would rewrite all the rules about who got to matter and who did not. When he reached her, he was close enough to touch. "You took a bullet for me," he said, and his voice was fractured, broken in a way she had never heard before. "You nearly died. And you think you endanger me?" She could not speak. The words from the letter seemed to echo between them, all the things she had written in the darkness of a hospital room where she thought no one would ever read them. He reached for her hand, and she did not pull away. "I do not want you to leave," he said. Emma and Marcus watched, and in that moment, everything turned toward a different future entirely. How did this story make you feel? Please leave a comment below and share what is in your heart. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Share this with someone who needs to hear it.